13 seconds, 6 trained killers, 1 drugged man. Bruce Lee made them all quit. 1 ring, 6 contract fighters. Bruce Lee was poisoned. They still couldn't touch him. 13 seconds. That's how long it took Bruce Lee to end 6 men while drugged. Hong Kong, 1965? The film industry is a machine, not the glamorous kind. The kind that chews through people, actors, stuntmen, extras. They're all replaceable. The only ones who aren't are the men who decide who moves and how. The stunt coordinators, the fight choreographers, the old guard. They've been running sets for decades. They know every angle, every fall, every strike that looks good on camera. They control the rhythm of a scene. They decide who's credible, who gets hurt, who gets remembered. Bruce Lee comes back to Hong Kong after years in America. He's 24. He's already known in certain circles, martial arts demonstrations in the States, a role on a television show that never made him a star, but made him visible. He's confident, precise, and he talks about martial arts in a way that makes the old system uncomfortable. He doesn't bow to tradition the way they expect. He questions techniques that have been standard for years. He moves differently, thinks differently. And worse, he's right, often enough that it's hard to ignore. The studios need him. His name carries weight in overseas markets. His movement on camera is clean, fast, undeniable. But the coordinators don't like him. Not because he's rude. He isn't. Not because he's arrogant in the traditional sense. He just refuses to pretend that outdated choreography is sacred. On set, he's polite, professional. He shows up early. He listens. But when they tell him to slow a kick down for the camera, he asks why. When they tell him a stance is wrong, he demonstrates why it isn't. He doesn't argue, he just shows. And that's worse. Because when you show someone they're wrong without saying a word, they can't fight back with logic. They can only resent you. The resentment builds quietly. In the way senior stunt performers exchange glances when Lee corrects a movement. In the way certain crew members stop talking when he walks by. In the tone of coordinators when they give him direction, technically respectful but cold. It's not personal, it's structural. He's an outsider threatening an established order. And in a system like that, the structure defends itself. They don't plot openly. There's no meeting, no conspiracy. But there's an understanding, a shared sentiment that circulates without being spoken aloud. He needs to be tested, not in a formal match. That would be too visible, too risky, but in a way that feels spontaneous, a demonstration, a moment where the old guard can see if his skill matches his confidence, or if, when real pressure is applied, he folds. The opportunity comes during a long shooting day, a period action film, lots of extras, lots of choreographed combat, the kind of set where stunt work dominates and egos collide in small, invisible ways. Lee is between takes, sitting off to the side. His posture is relaxed. He's drinking water, reviewing his next scene. He doesn't look tense, doesn't look like he's bracing for anything. One of the senior coordinators approaches, older man, respected. He's smiling. "We'd like to see a demonstration," he says, casual, almost friendly. "The crew's curious. You talk about real combat. We'd like to see it." Lee looks up. He doesn't hesitate. "Of course." The coordinator nods. "Good. We've arranged a space, just a friendly exchange, no pressure." Lee stands. "When?" 20 minutes. We'll set it up." He walks away. Lee sits back down, finishes his water. He doesn't know yet that the 6 men waiting aren't stuntmen. They're fighters pulled from local clubs, underground circuits where rules are suggestions and reputations are built on bone. They've been paid. Not much, just enough. He doesn't know that the drink he just finished wasn't clean. 20 minutes later, someone calls his name. The ring is waiting. The ring isn't a ring, not officially. It's a cleared section of the warehouse floor where they store equipment between chutes, wooden boards, sandbags, tape marking rough boundaries, enough space for a crowd to form around the edges, enough distance from the main set that what happens here stays quiet. Lee walks in. The crew is already gathered. 50, maybe 60 people, grips, lighting technicians, extras, a few actors. They're standing in loose clusters, arms crossed, waiting. The energy isn't excitement, it's anticipation, the kind that comes before something breaks. In the center, 6 men are waiting. Lee recognizes the type immediately, not by face, by posture. These aren't film people. They don't carry themselves like performers. Their stances are too grounded, their eyes too focused. They're not here to act. They're here to test. One of them is older, thick shoulders, scar across his knuckles. The others are younger, but not inexperienced. They're loose, shifting their weight, rolling their necks, warming up the way fighters do before something real. Lee stops at the edge of the marked space. He doesn't step in yet. He's watching, reading. His expression hasn't changed. Calm, neutral, but something in his eyes shifts, just slightly. Recognition, maybe, or recalibration. The senior coordinator from earlier steps forward. Same smile, same casual tone. "We thought it would be good for the crew to see how real technique works," he says. "These men have agreed to help. Just light sparring, controlled. No one gets hurt." Lee nods. He doesn't respond verbally. He's still watching the 6 men. They're not looking at the coordinator. They're looking at him. One of them, the older one with the scar, tilts his head slightly. Not a challenge, just acknowledgement. Fighter to fighter. He knows what this is. So does Lee. The coordinator gestures to the ring. "Whenever you're ready." Lee steps forward. His movement is smooth, but not quite as fluid as usual. There's a slight hesitation in his balance, a fractional delay in his footwork. He doesn't stumble, doesn't show obvious distress, but something is off. His vision is blurred at the edges, not enough to blind him, just enough to make depth harder to judge. His inner ear feels slightly disconnected from his body. The ground is stable, but his brain isn't entirely convinced. He knows what this is. He's felt it before. Not often, but enough. Something in the water. Something mild. Just enough to disrupt coordination without shutting him down. He doesn't say anything, doesn't accuse, doesn't look around for help, because in this moment, on this set, in front of this crew, there is no help. There's only what happens next. He steps into the center. The 6 men spread out. Not in a formal pattern, just instinct, surrounding, closing angles. They're not rushing. They're not posturing. They're doing what they've been paid to do. Apply pressure, see what breaks. The crew goes quiet. Lee doesn't take a stance, not a traditional one. He stands upright, weight centered, hands loose at his sides. His head is tilted slightly, listening, watching, compensating for what his eyes can't fully trust. One of the younger men shifts forward, testing, seeing if Lee reacts. He doesn't. Another one moves to the left, closer, tightening the circle. Still nothing. The coordinator is watching from the edge. His arms are folded. He's not smiling anymore. This isn't entertainment. It's evaluation. And depending on how the next 60 seconds go, it's reputation. If Lee hesitates, if he backs down, if he asks to stop, if he shows fear or doubt or anything less than absolute control, his credibility is gone. Not just on this set, everywhere. Because stories travel fast in a tight industry, and failure, once witnessed by this many people, becomes fact. The older man with the scar takes a step forward. He's not the fastest, not the flashiest, but he's the one who sets the rhythm. The others will follow his lead. He stops just outside striking range. His eyes lock onto Lee's, not aggressive, evaluating, measuring. Lee meets his gaze. His breathing is slow, controlled. He blinks once, long, resetting his focus, clearing the haze as much as he can. Then he does something no one expects. He smiles, not mockingly, not nervously, just calm, a quiet acknowledgement of what this is, what they're all pretending it isn't. And in that moment, the older fighter knows. This won't go the way they planned. He lunges. The older man moves first. Not wild, not reckless. A straight punch, fast, committed, aimed at the center of Lee's chest. The kind of strike that's meant to test structure. If Lee's balance is compromised, if his core is weak, this punch will fold him. Lee doesn't block. He shifts, minimal, just enough. The punch cuts past his shoulder, and in the same motion, before the man can retract, Lee's hand is on his wrist, not grabbing, guiding, redirecting the energy forward, past its natural endpoint. The man stumbles, just one step, but it's enough. His weight is wrong. His recovery is delayed. Lee doesn't follow. He releases the wrist and steps back, resets. The man turns, reorients. His expression hasn't changed, but his eyes have. There's a question in them now. Two others move in simultaneously, one from the left, one from the right. Coordinated. They've done this before. Cornered someone, forced a reaction, overwhelmed with numbers. Lee doesn't retreat. He steps into the gap between them, narrowing the angle, making them adjust. The one on the left swings, a hook aimed at Lee's temple. Lee ducks under it, drops his weight, and his rear leg sweeps out low, fast, precise. It catches the man's lead ankle mid-step. He goes down hard, shoulder first. The sound echoes in the warehouse. The one on the right lunges, tries to grab. Lee's forearm comes up, not to block, but to wedge into the man's elbow joint, collapsing his structure before the grab completes. Then a short, sharp palm to the sternum, not theatrical, not flashy, just efficient. The man staggers back, gasping, trying to pull air back into his lungs. 3 down, not unconscious, but out of rhythm, out of the fight. The remaining 3 hesitate, not out of fear, out of recalculation. This isn't going the way it was supposed to. The setup was simple. 6 against 1, compromised target, controlled chaos. But the chaos isn't controlled anymore. The crowd is still silent. No one is cheering. No one is moving. They're watching something they don't fully understand. This doesn't look like the choreography they know. There's no wind-up, no dramatic pauses, just action and consequence, compressed into seconds. One of the younger fighters, lean, fast, confident, decides to change tactics. He doesn't charge. He feints, steps in, pulls back, tries to draw Lee forward, bait him into overcommitting. Lee doesn't bite. He waits. The fighter feints again, closer this time, testing, still nothing. Then the fighter commits, a low kick, hard, aimed at Lee's lead leg, trying to compromise his base. Lee lifts his leg, not high, just enough. The kick passes underneath, and as the fighter's momentum carries him forward, Lee's foot comes down, not on the ground, on the back of the fighter's knee, buckle, drop. The man catches himself with his hands, tries to push back up, but Lee's already moved past him, doesn't need to finish. The point is made, 2 left. They're standing together now, closer than before. One of them glances at the older man, the one with the scar who's back on his feet but hasn't re-engaged. There's a silent exchange, a decision. They both move at once. No coordination, just desperation, trying to create enough chaos that something lands. Lee doesn't try to counter both. He targets one, the closer one, steps into his space, inside his guard, too close for the strike to have power. His elbow comes up, sharp, angled, into the man's jaw. Not a knockout, just enough to disrupt his equilibrium, his balance, his will to continue. The man drops to one knee. Dazed, the last one is mid-swing, a wide, looping punch, all commitment, no exit strategy. Lee doesn't block it. He steps off the line, lets it pass. And as the man's body rotates with the missed punch, Lee's back fist catches him on the temple. Light, controlled, but placed perfectly. The man freezes. His legs forget how to hold him. He sits down, hard, blinks, tries to stand. Can't. 13 seconds. 6 men. Done. Lee stands in the center. His breathing is elevated, but only slightly. His vision is still blurred. His balance still isn't perfect. But none of that mattered, because precision doesn't require perfect conditions. It requires perfect control. He doesn't look around, doesn't address the crowd, doesn't acknowledge the men on the floor. He simply turns and walks out of the marked space. His steps are even, calm. He picks up a towel from the equipment table, wipes his hands. Then he sits back down, in the same spot he was before, like nothing happened. The 6 men are still on the ground. Some are getting up slowly. Others are still catching their breath. None of them look angry, just quiet, thoughtful, the kind of quiet that comes after a lesson you didn't ask for but can't unlearn. The crew hasn't moved. They're still standing in their clusters, watching, waiting for something, applause maybe, or commentary, or Lee to say something. He doesn't. He just sits, picks up a bottle of water, fresh, from his own bag this time, and drinks. The coordinator who arranged it is still standing at the edge. His arms are no longer folded. His expression is unreadable, not angry, not impressed, just recalibrating. After a long moment, he turns and walks away. The crowd begins to disperse, slowly, in silence. A few people glance back at Lee as they leave. He doesn't meet their eyes. He's reviewing notes for his next scene, as if the last 13 seconds never happened. The thing no one talks about afterward is the silence, not during the fight. After, the 6 men eventually stand, slowly. The older one with the scar is the first. He rolls his shoulder, tests his wrist. Nothing broken, nothing permanent, but something is different. He looks at Lee once, just once, and then turns and walks out. No words, no nod, just departure. The others follow, one by one. They don't speak to each other, don't compare notes, don't debrief. They just leave, because there's nothing to say. They came to test someone, to apply pressure, to see if reputation matched reality. And within 13 seconds, they had their answer. Not in the way they expected, not in a way they can package into a story that makes them look better. The crew lingers for a few more minutes. Some of them pretend to check equipment. Others stand in small groups, speaking in low voices. But their eyes keep drifting back to Lee. He's still sitting, still reviewing his script. His posture hasn't changed. His expression is neutral. He looks like someone waiting for the next take, not someone who just dismantled 6 fighters while drugged. One of the younger actors, a stunt performer who's been on set for weeks, finally walks over. He stops a few feet away, hesitates, then speaks. I've never seen anything like that. Lee looks up. His face is calm, not dismissive, not proud, just present. It wasn't anything special, he says. His voice is even, matter of fact. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to test me. Different intention, different outcome. The actor nods, doesn't fully understand, but senses that pushing further won't yield more. Lee returns to his script. The actor walks away. By the time filming resumes an hour later, the energy on set has shifted. It's subtle, nothing overt, but the coordinators speak to Lee differently. Not warmer, not friendlier, just clearer, direct. They don't question his adjustments anymore. They don't suggest he slow down for the camera. They just watch, learn, adapt. The stunt performers stop testing him in small ways. Before, there were always little challenges, slightly harder falls than necessary, grips held a fraction too long, movements timed to make him adjust. The kind of microaggression that's invisible to outsiders but exhausting to endure. It stops. Not because anyone says anything, not because of policy or intervention. It stops because the question has been answered and everyone knows it. Over the next few days, the crew works differently around Lee. They don't avoid him, they don't fear him, but there's a respect now that wasn't there before, the kind that comes not from affection or admiration, but from direct evidence. You can tell someone you're skilled. You can show them forms, techniques, demonstrations under controlled conditions. But when the conditions aren't controlled, when you're compromised, outnumbered, and the situation is designed to expose you, and you still perform with precision, that's different. That's not skill. That's mastery, and mastery doesn't need to be repeated. One evening, near the end of the shoot, one of the grips approaches Lee during a break. Older man, worked in the industry for 30 years, seen every kind of personality, every kind of ego. "Can I ask you something?" he says. Lee nods. "That thing that happened with the 6 guys, you didn't talk about it, didn't explain. Why?" Lee considers the question, takes a sip of tea, then answers. "Because explaining would have made it about me, about pride, about proving something." He pauses. "But I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just responding to what was in front of me. If I'd made it into a story, people would have debated whether it was real, whether I exaggerated, whether they could have done better. The silence lets it be what it was, nothing more, nothing less." The grip nods slowly. "So, you just let it sit." "I let it be true," Lee says. "Truth doesn't need a speech." The grip smiles, walks away. Later that night, after the shoot wraps, a few crew members gather at a nearby noodle shop. It's the kind of place where film people go after long days. Cheap, fast, open late. The conversation drifts, as it always does, to the day's work. Someone brings it up, the fight, the 13 seconds. "You think they really tried?" one of them asks, "or were they going easy?" "They weren't going easy," another says, flat, certain. "I saw their faces, they committed." "Then how?" "I don't know. That's the point. I don't know." Silence. "You think he was really drugged?" I don't know that either, but I know he wasn't moving right at first, and by the end, he was. So what does that mean? No one answers, because the answer isn't something you can articulate easily. It's not about toughness or strength or even technique. It's about something deeper, something harder to name. Control, not over the opponent, over yourself, over your reactions, over the chaos that wants to consume you when the situation turns. That's what they witnessed, and that's what stays with them. Not the strikes, not the speed, the control. One of them finally speaks. I wouldn't want to fight him. The others nod. I wouldn't want to test him either. More nods. They finish their noodles in silence, and the story, without ever being formalized, without ever being written down, begins to spread. Not as gossip, not as rumor, as fact, quiet, undeniable fact. Bruce Lee was challenged, he was compromised, he responded, and in 13 seconds the conversation ended. Not with violence, with clarity. The film wraps 2 weeks later. No one mentions the incident again. Not directly, but it's there, in the way people move around Lee, in the way conversations pause when he enters a room, then resume without skipping a beat, but with a different tone. He's not treated like a celebrity, not like a master in the traditional sense. He's treated like a fact, something observable, undeniable. The way you treat gravity or time. You don't debate it. You just account for it. The senior coordinator who arranged the demonstration never apologizes, never acknowledges what happened, but 2 days after the incident, he approaches Lee during a break. I need your input on a sequence, he says. His tone is neutral, professional. Lee looks up, waits. The final fight. The choreography isn't working. The timing's off. He pauses. I'd like to know what you'd do differently. It's not an apology, but it's an acknowledgement, a shift in authority, a recognition that the old structure, the one that required Lee to prove himself, no longer applies. Lee nods. Show me. They walk to the set together. The coordinator explains the sequence. Lee watches, suggests adjustments, small things, angle changes, footwork tweaks, the kind of details that seem minor but change everything. The coordinator listens, takes notes, doesn't argue. When they finish, he looks at Lee. Thank you. Lee nods, walks away. That's the end of it. No public reconciliation, no symbolic gesture, just a quiet recalibration of respect. The kind that doesn't need ceremony because it's already understood. The crew notices, they always notice. And the story, the real story, begins to settle into something more permanent. It's not told like a fight story, it's told like a lesson. Did you hear what happened on the Lee film? The 6 guys? Yeah, but it's not about the fight. It's about what he didn't do. What do you mean? He didn't brag, didn't explain, didn't make it bigger than it was. He just handled it, then moved on. That's it. That's it. And that's why it matters. The story spreads, but it spreads quietly. Not in newspapers, not in interviews, just from crew member to crew member, set to set, city to city. By the time Lee leaves Hong Kong and returns to the States a few months later, the incident has become part of his reputation, but not in the way most reputations are built. There's no recording, no official account, just witness testimony, consistent, unembellished, true, and because it's not exaggerated, it's believed. A year later, Lee is working on another project, different city, different crew. But word has traveled. The stunt coordinator on this film, a man who's worked in the industry for decades, who's trained fighters, who knows the difference between performance and reality, approaches him on the first day. I heard a story about you, he says. Lee doesn't respond, just waits. Hong Kong, 6 men, 13 seconds. Lee's expression doesn't change. Stories get exaggerated. This one didn't, the coordinator says. I know 3 people who were there. They all told it the same way. He pauses. That doesn't happen with stories, only with facts. Lee nods, says nothing. The coordinator smiles. I won't waste your time or mine. You know what you're doing. I'll trust that. From that point forward, there are no tests, no politics, no silent challenges, just work. Clean, professional, efficient. Because the lesson has already been taught, back in Hong Kong, the 6 men from that day go on with their lives. Most of them don't talk about it. Not out of shame, out of respect. They were hired to do a job. They did it. The outcome wasn't what anyone expected, that's all. But one of them, the older man with the scar, eventually becomes a teacher, runs a small school in Kowloon, trains fighters, real ones, not for film, for competition, for life. Years later, one of his students asks him about Bruce Lee. The student has heard stories, wants to know if they're true. The teacher is quiet for a long time. Then he speaks. I fought him once, he says. Not in a ring, not officially, just a situation. What happened? I learned something. What? The teacher considers, chooses his words carefully. I learned that real skill isn't about winning. It's about control. He could have hurt us. Badly. He didn't. He could have humiliated us, made a spectacle. He didn't. He just responded, precisely, efficiently. And then stopped. He pauses. That's mastery, knowing when to act and when to stop. The student nods, doesn't fully understand yet, but will eventually. The teacher never tells the full story, doesn't need to. The lesson is already there. On the Hong Kong set where it happened, the warehouse is eventually torn down, rebuilt into something else. The exact spot where Lee stood that day is now part of a parking garage. Concrete, fluorescent lights, no marker, no plaque. But the people who were there remember, not the violence, not the spectacle, the silence, the way Lee sat afterward, calm, unbothered, reviewing his script like nothing had happened, the way he never brought it up again, the way the entire structure of that set, who was respected, who was questioned, who had authority, shifted in 13 seconds without a single word being spoken. That's what they remember, and that's what they pass on, not as legend, as lesson. 15 years later, 1980, a small martial arts school in San Francisco. The walls are covered with photographs, students in various poses, certificates, a few faded newspaper clippings. In the corner, barely visible, there's a picture of Bruce Lee. Not from a film, from a demonstration. His expression is focused, controlled. The instructor is in his 50s now. He trained in Hong Kong in the 60s, worked on film sets, did stunt coordination before moving to America and opening this school. He doesn't advertise his connection to Lee, doesn't use it to attract students. But sometimes, when the moment is right, he tells stories. Tonight, after class, a few students stay behind. They're talking about a tournament coming up, nervous energy, questions about strategy, about facing opponents who are bigger, faster, more experienced. One of them asks the instructor a question. How do you deal with being outmatched? The instructor wipes down a training pad, thinks, then sits. Let me tell you about something I saw, he says. The students settle in. They know this tone. This is how he teaches the things that can't be demonstrated on mats. Hong Kong, 1965. I was working on a film. Bruce Lee was there. This was before he was famous, before anyone outside martial arts circles really knew who he was. He pauses. Some people on that set didn't respect him, thought he was too confident, too different. So they arranged a test. He tells them about the 6 fighters, the drugged water, the warehouse, the 13 seconds. He doesn't embellish, doesn't add drama, just describes what he saw. When he finishes, the students are quiet. "So he just won?" one of them finally asks. "No," the instructor says. "That's not the point. Winning was inevitable once he decided to engage. The point is everything else." "I don't understand." The instructor leans forward. He was compromised. His vision was blurred. His balance was off. He was outnumbered. The situation was designed to expose him, to break him. He pauses, and his response wasn't to fight harder. It was to be more precise, more controlled. He didn't waste a single movement, didn't use more force than necessary, didn't let emotion dictate his response. But he was drugged. Exactly. And he still maintained perfect control. Because control isn't about perfect conditions, it's about perfect discipline. No matter what's happening around you, no matter what's happening inside you. He stops, lets that settle. That's what I learned that day. Not how to fight, how to be, how to maintain yourself when everything is trying to destabilize you. Another student speaks up. Did he ever talk about it after? Never, not once. He sat down, reviewed his script, continued working like nothing happened. Why? Because making it into a story would have made it about ego, about status. He wasn't interested in that. He was interested in the work, in being truthful to what he knew. The demonstration wasn't for the crowd. It was for himself. Proof that his training was real, that his philosophy worked under pressure. The instructor pauses. The rest of us just happen to witness it. The room is quiet. Outside, traffic hums. The city moves on, indifferent. One of the students finally asks the question they're all thinking. Could we do that, what he did? The instructor considers. Probably not. Not at his level. Not with his precision. He looks at each of them. But that's not the lesson. The lesson is that mastery is possible, that control is possible, that you can be compromised, outmatched, tested beyond what seems fair, and still respond with clarity, still be yourself. He stands, starts putting equipment away. That's what I carry from that day, not the fight, the reminder that discipline matters more than conditions, that the quality of your response defines you more than the circumstances you face. The students help clean up, slowly, thoughtfully. As they leave, one of them pauses at the door, looks back at the photograph of Lee in the corner. "Do you think he knew," the student asks, "that we'd still be talking about it, years later?" The instructor glances at the photo, shakes his head. "I don't think he cared. That's the point. He wasn't performing for history. He was just being honest to what the moment required." He turns off the lights. That's why it lasted, because it was true. They walk out into the San Francisco night. Across the world, in Hong Kong, in dojos and film sets and training halls, the story still circulates. 40 years later. 50. It never becomes mythology. Never gets twisted into something it wasn't, because too many people saw it, and the ones who saw it don't exaggerate. They just describe, quietly, accurately, the way you describe something that changed how you understood what was possible. The warehouse is gone. The film was released and forgotten. Most of the crew have moved on, retired, passed away. But the lesson remains, not in monuments, not in speeches, in the way certain instructors teach, the way certain fighters train, the way certain people approach pressure, with precision, with control, with the understanding that mastery isn't loud, it's silent. It's sitting down after 13 seconds and reviewing your script. It's never needing to mention it again. It's knowing that the work speaks, and that truth doesn't require narration. Bruce Lee died in 1973, too young, too suddenly. The world mourned. The films became iconic. The philosophy spread. Books were written, documentaries made. But for the people who were in that warehouse in 1965, the legacy isn't in the movies. It's in the moment he stood up, stepped into a rigged situation, and responded with perfect clarity. Then sat back down and never spoke of it again. That's the story. Not the 13 seconds, the silence after, and the fact that decades later, in schools and gyms and quiet conversations, people still pause when they tell it. Not because it's dramatic, because it's true. And truth, once witnessed, doesn't fade. It just waits for the next person ready to learn. 15 years later, 1982, a documentary filmmaker named Richard Murphy is researching Bruce Lee's life in Seattle. Bruce has been dead for 9 years. The legend has only grown. Richard interviews dozens of people, students from Bruce's early schools, friends, fellow martial artists. Everyone has stories. But one story keeps appearing in fragments, whispers, half-remembered details, something that happened at a Chinese restaurant in 1967. Richard tracks down Mr. Chen, now 72 years old, retired, living in a small apartment in Chinatown. "Did something happen at your restaurant involving Bruce Lee?" Richard asks. Mr. Chen is quiet for a long time. Then he nods slowly. "Sunday night, March 1967. 8 bikers came in. They wanted to fight Bruce." "What happened?" "I cleaned up afterward. Took maybe 10 minutes. There was spilled soup, a broken bottle, some overturned chairs." "That is it? Just cleaning?" Mr. Chen smiles faintly. "The fight itself? I could not follow it. Too fast. I saw Bruce stand up. I saw men fall down. I heard sounds I cannot describe. Then it was over." "How long did it last?" "Maybe the time it takes to boil water for tea, maybe less." Richard finds one of Bruce's senior students from that era, a man named James DeMille, who trained under Bruce for 3 years. "I was not there that night," James says, "but Bruce told me about it. Not the details, just the principle." "What principle?" "He said, 'I did not fight 8 men. I fought 8 opportunities to demonstrate control.' That is how Bruce thought. Every confrontation was a lesson for him, for his opponent, for anyone watching." Richard tries to find the bikers. Most have scattered, moved to other cities. 1 has died. 2 refuse to talk. But he finds Rick, the one who questioned Vincent that night, the one who suggested they should leave. Rick is 47 now, works construction, has a family, has been clean from the club life for over a decade. "I will tell you what I saw," Rick says, "but you will not believe me. Try me." Bruce Lee moved in ways that should not be possible. He was not faster than us. He was not stronger, but he was always exactly where he needed to be, like he could see 3 seconds into the future. That sounds like exaggeration. I know how it sounds, but I was there. Vincent swung a chain at him, heavy steel chain. Bruce caught it with his bare arm, should have shattered bone, did not even leave a bruise. Rick leans forward, his voice dropping. "And the way he hit Vincent? I have been in fights. I know what a punch looks like. That was not a punch. It was something else, something I do not have words for." Did Bruce ever explain his technique? Not to us, but years later I read about dim mak, pressure points. I think that is what he used, but knowledge like that, it takes decades to master. Most people do not believe it exists. Richard interviews Dr. Patterson, now semi-retired, but still consulting at Seattle General. "I kept those X-rays," Dr. Patterson admits. "I have shown them to colleagues over the years, trauma specialists, orthopedic surgeons. Nobody can explain the injury pattern." "What makes it unusual?" "The precision. When someone punches you, force disperses, spreads across multiple structures, but these injuries focused on specific points, like surgical strikes." Dr. Patterson pulls out the old X-ray films, still in his personal files after all these years. This is Vincent's sternum. See these microfractures? They form a pattern, almost like a fingerprint. Bruce's fist landed exactly here, with exactly this much force, creating exactly this result. Could it have been luck? 3 patients, 3 different injury types, all from the same encounter, all showing the same level of precision. That is not luck, that is mastery. Richard tries one more time to reach Vincent. Finally, after 6 months of searching, he finds him. Vincent is 52, runs an auto repair shop in Oregon, has left the motorcycle club life completely. They meet at a diner. Vincent orders coffee, sits across from Richard, studies him carefully. "Why do you want to know about that night?" Vincent asks. "Because Bruce Lee changed martial arts, changed action films, changed how the world sees fighting. And I think that night in your restaurant was important, a moment that defined who he was." Vincent sips his coffee, silent. "I have interviewed everyone else," Richard continues. "Mr. Chen, Rick, Bruce's students, the doctors who treated you. They all tell pieces of the story. But you were the one who fought him. You know the truth." Vincent sets down his cup. "The truth is, I went to that restaurant to hurt someone, and I left understanding I knew nothing about fighting, nothing about control, nothing about real strength." "What did Bruce teach you?" "He taught me without speaking. He showed me that size does not matter. Anger does not matter. Numbers do not matter. What matters is understanding, precision, and knowing when to stop." Vincent's eyes grow distant, remembering. "I could have died that night. We all could have. Bruce could have crushed my windpipe, could have broken my spine, could have caused permanent damage. But he did not. He used exactly enough force to stop us, no more. That takes incredible control. It takes something beyond control. It takes compassion. He stopped us without destroying us. That is not fighting. That is teaching." Richard leans back. "One more question. If you could go back to that night, knowing what you know now, would you still walk into that restaurant?" Vincent considers this carefully. "No, but I am grateful I did, because it changed my life, made me understand that real power is not about dominating others. It is about mastering yourself." The documentary is never completed. Richard realizes the story is too fragmented, too unbelievable, too dependent on testimony that sounds like mythology. But he keeps the interview tapes, the X-rays, the witness statements, and sometimes late at night he watches the footage of Vincent describing that moment when Bruce Lee's fist touched his chest and his entire world changed. In Seattle, the Golden Dragon restaurant closed in 1979. The building was torn down. A parking lot stands there now, but old-timers in Chinatown still tell stories about the night 8 men walked in looking for a fight and walked out understanding they had met someone beyond fighting, someone who saw violence not as conquest, but as opportunity, not as victory, but as teaching. Someone who proved that the best fight is not the one you win. It is the one where everyone walks away changed. Bruce Lee never spoke publicly about that night, never confirmed it, never denied it. In a 1971 interview, a journalist asked him, "Have you ever been in a real street fight?" Bruce smiled, that small, knowing smile. "I have been in situations, but a real martial artist does not measure success by how many people he defeats. He measures it by how many people he teaches, even if the teaching happens in 12 seconds." The journalist did not understand the reference, but those who were there in that small restaurant on King Street in March 1967 understood perfectly. They carry that lesson still, not in words, not in stories told at parties, but in how they move through the world, with control, with precision, with the understanding that true strength is knowing when to hold back. That is the legend Bruce Lee left behind. Not in films, not in tournaments, not in public demonstrations, but in the quiet transformation of 8 men who thought they understood fighting, until they met someone who understood something far deeper.